Yes, we have our final speaker, our own, Mrs. Aisha Aminu. She's an architect, a co-founder of Think Green Foundation. She has a master's in environment and sustainable development from the University College London. She has worked with architectural companies in Dubai and Nigeria, where she focused on urban regeneration and the conservation and restoration of public buildings. She has also volunteered in various capacities for several organizations and causes, such as CPDI, Africa Global Studio, UN Habitat, the Institute of Imagination, and the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. Together with her husband, Aisha is co-founder of Think Green Foundation, which aims to nurture new ideas to preserve existing habitats. I welcome you to the floor, to the digital floor, Mrs. Aisha Aminu.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for that warm introduction. I'm happy to be here and honored to be amongst these very experienced speakers that have gone before me. I am happy to be last because I feel my presentation would tie up everything that everyone has spoken about and tell us the ways that we could move forward. So I will be talking about local. What does local mean? We're looking at the impact of local building materials on health and well-being to tie into the theme of innovative approaches to sustainable architecture. I'd like my session to be a bit more interactive, so I would like the audience to respond at certain times using the chat box, please. Let's start with the images we see on the screen. What is local to you? The image you see as A or what you see as B? Please respond in the chat. A or B?
Okay, so I see answers in the chat box. We have
great.
B from Mukhtar. We have Shaib says both are local. Jamila Jibril says B. Imia Song Etim B. Hawa Riba both.
Great. Great responses from everyone. What if I told you that both of them are local? A is a typical public school building that we have in Nigeria. So by that, we could say this is local to us. B is actually a school in Lebanon that was built for a displaced community. So it's in a refugee camp. And that is local to them because of the meaning that was attached to the materials used in creating that building. So when we say local, how do we identify it? Is it by location? Is it because of the cultural meaning attached to it? Is it because the material is natural and applied in traditional context? And what else do we refer to it? We typically refer to local as vernacular and old, and these usually have negative connotations. But what if we challenge that definition? Instead of location, we could think of the availability, how easy it is to find these materials within our nearest vicinity, utilize them. When we talk about cultural significance, how about we look at it in terms of the skills? Are there people available that have the expertise to be able to extract such materials and utilize them in construction? When we look at natural, can we also expand our thinking to include materials that are man-made? Does local have to be traditional? Why can't it also be modern? Does it have to be old? Why can't it be a mix of old and new as well? Does it also have to remain in the past as vernacular and only relevant to indigenous communities? Why can't it be brought forward and have the materials standardized into formal architecture? So with that definition, we can then see that there are so many different materials that can be categorized as local. Concrete and steel we typically see as non-local. What if we look at concrete and steel in terms of the raw materials that are used to create them? Concrete usually has limestone within it, gypsum, fly ash, and silica. The same with steel. Steel has iron ore, coal, scrap metal. These are raw materials that are used during the manufacturing process. Iron ore deposits can be found in quantities reaching about 3 billion metric tons across Kogi, Enugu, and Niger State, as well as the FCT, whereas limestone has been found in huge quantities in the Benue, Sokoto, and Borno basins of Nigeria. So if we change the lens with which we view local, our range expands, and our definition becomes one that is defined by the context in which it is used, as well as it becomes expanded to include natural materials, industrially processed materials, recycled, reclaimed, or adapted materials. And if local is constrained by location and culture, and we still decide to favor the notion that it is traditional or vernacular, would a material then cease to be local if it is utilized within the same geographical context by a community to which it has no traditional or cultural significance? I would leave you with that thought for now. But let's go ahead and look at local in the context of displacement. Displacement usually comes about through conflict or disaster, whereby people lose their homes, their livelihoods, and even families sometimes. If you look at the images on the screen right now, you can see a mix of materials. Some could be termed as local, some could be termed as non-local, but they're all materials that are used for temporary shelter. If we dig deeper, we can then see there are different conditions that influence material selection. In the context of displacement, what we're thinking about is the uncertainty of how long that displacement would last and how safe it is for people to even move somewhere else and settle. We're quickly thinking, okay, how do we get shelter delivered to these people? We need to construct shelter for them very fast. And there are economic constraints attached to such conditions. You usually have the UN providing aid. So again, finding the labor and the skills needed to be able to deliver such rapid construction is quite difficult in the scale that it would be needed. And then we would also need to keep in mind that such communities and such developments for displaced people are always termed as temporary settlements. So whatever is constructed should be something that is easily disassembled. With that definition, we can look at different local materials, such as the ones that we saw in the previous images. There was wood, there was thatch, there was zinc, there was also tarpaulin, which may or may not be termed local depending on where it is sourced from. So a local material should be able to affect the well-being and the physical health of its users, as well as the people involved within its sourcing and construction applications. If we look at well-being, well-being is a state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy, given the life circumstances, social norms, and values that one is exposed to. So a local material should be able to create that shelter, comfort, dignity, security, and solidarity amongst the displaced people. Then when we talk about physical health, there are certain indicators of physical health, such as blood pressure, body weight, energy, sleep, balance and coordination, strength and stamina. And the physical and chemical properties of building materials can impact the health of the users as well as the actors involved within the life cycle of that material. So for this case, a local material should be durable. It should be impermeable to the elements of weather. It should have non-toxic characteristics, and it should be able to provide some sort of thermal value, either by being an insulator or a conductor. So if we look at an example, we have our architect Rizvi Hassan, who standardizes local materials in refugee camps for Rohingyans in Bangladesh. He uses materials like concrete for the base of the buildings and cement to do the flooring and make it impermeable. He uses metal sheets for the roof of the wall panel such that it's easy to construct the buildings and dismantle them when they're no longer needed. And then he added plastic mats for the ceiling to serve as insulation. Now, looking at it critically, we would then ask ourselves, is local always good? Local materials have impacts on our well-being and our health. If we're looking at well-being, it could be termed as the social dimension, whereas physical health would belong to the environmental dimension. In the social dimension, like we spoke about previously, it would be safety, social ties, culture, and our livelihoods. So in the social dimension, a local material could have both positive and negative impacts. It could create jobs through the sourcing of the material, its application in construction, as well as maintenance after construction has been completed. It could also strengthen social networks between the users of the building as well as the actors involved in the creation of such buildings. And it could strengthen cultural identity by making the local material to be perceived in a more positive aspect. On the flip side, it could lead to stakeholder power struggles, where certain people feel they have more rights to claim a material as local to them. And in terms of the sourcing of such materials, it could also lead to insecurity challenges to safety of the actors involved in extraction. When we look at the environmental dimension, it could have a positive impact on the environment if that material during extraction results in lower pollution levels, less toxic byproducts, and reduced waste, especially if that material is created through maybe recycling, reuse, or reclamation. However, it could also have negative impacts if during that extraction it leads to the destruction of topography. You could think of it in terms of, say, limestone or wood, where the extraction process really affects the topography of the environment. It could also contribute to climate change, and overuse or dependency could lead to biodiversity loss. So we've looked at local in the context of displacement. Now I would like us to look at it in the...
Sorry, Architect Aisha, sorry, apologies. You have about 4 minutes left.
Great.
Just a nudge. Yes, thank you. And if you could, sorry, press F5, maybe it would help with this with the slides.
Okay. No, it doesn't work.
Okay. All right. Just go on. Sorry about that.
All right. So if we're implementing local in the context of education, I'd like you to also look at the images on the screen. A typical public school building in Nigeria looks like this, whereas there are certain images here. I would have loved for you to see it in slide mode. Let me just see if that might work. So these are schools designed by Francis Carey, who has already been touched upon by many of the speakers before me. And I would like to do a little deep dive into that. So he standardizes local materials for school buildings in Africa. He uses earth, bricks, metal sheets, steel rods, and eucalyptus wood, which is actually an indigenous species to Burkina Faso, as well as concrete. In one of his buildings, the Burkina Institute of Technology, he uses earth that has been reinforced with concrete, bricks, metal sheets, steel rods, and the eucalyptus wood for the ceilings and the shading devices for the walkways around the school. And if we're looking at it in terms of health impacts and well-being impacts, the combination of these materials creates a positive indoor environmental quality in terms of the thermal, acoustic, and lighting properties of this building. And it also impacts the well-being of the people, the users, the community, people involved in the construction through the creation of livelihoods, a positive cultural identity, and also improved community custodianship of the building. So if we're looking at the future of local education buildings, what we've seen so far is all good and fine, but I think it could be even better. And so do the people at Rolo, who have visualized what African educational centers should look like when local building materials are utilized using modern technology and are accompanied by the infusion of African art and architecture. So this is an example of a building where you can see glass being used, so as well as some earth relief happening on the facade. Apart from this, another example is here. You could think of this as mosaic happening on the wall or some sort of panel. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You could also think of this as being some sort of metal perforated panels that have been infused with concrete reinforced clay for the building and glass. And another example is this, where you could think, okay, this is a mud structure that has been painted over with various colors and motifs representing the African culture. So if we look further, this is how it would be on the inside. This would be the walkways of such a school, for instance. And don't you think that you would want to walk these halls too? And I believe that a local school building like this would help in transforming the quality of our educational sector. I would prefer to go to a school that looks like this, and I believe that it would enhance my health and well-being and also affect the quality of education that I would receive. And that brings me to the end. Thank you very much.